Norfolk pine trees. And this is how I make my own varnish. They have this stuff called pine resin that comes out the side of them whenever something like a branch breaks off. And I'll use a screwdriver to gather up as much as I can. And then, when we were kids, I used to chew this stuff. That would explain it, folks. And then here you have the 2 containers worth, 2 1-quart containers, and I'll fill them up with turpentine and put that out in the sun and shake it. The one on the left there was out in the sun for about 4 and 5 months or so. The other 2 maybe for 2 months. And shake it up every once in a while. And all this is for is to soften it up. You could skip this out in the sun bit, but I think it makes it get a little darker and softens it up so it dissolves better. But that's the first step, which you could skip, but I don't. And then the only other ingredient in the whole thing is to get it mixed with boiled linseed oil. You got to get the boiled linseed oil for some reason. Anyways, I use an old pot, and I put it on this little portable gas stove on top of a plywood sheet, or you could use anything else as long as it's flammable. And then I pour off the turpentine from the jars, and do all your pouring away from the flame, away from the stove. And you have to do this outside with some wind going. There's no doubt this is dangerous, so you be really, really careful. Do it outside, and don't work over the stove. And so you put all the resin into the pot and add the linseed oil so it just covers it. And then you start cooking it. I start out a little bit on a medium, and then I go down to a low heat. And after about 5 minutes, it'll start to have little bubbles. And don't work over it. Always work off the side of the thing. The whole idea here is that all these little, I'll call them potatoes, they're all going to melt into the linseed oil. So what you have here is just linseed oil and pine resin. This is how they made all varnishes hundreds of years ago. This is your basic varnish for everything. Violins, boats, everything. You can use any kind of pine trees, and there's pine trees everywhere practically. And here I am smashing up what I call the little potatoes. Now, this whole cooking thing, this went on for about an hour and 5 minutes or so. And see all this? These are little pieces of bark and little pieces of wood that separate. And here I am smashing up what I call the little potatoes, because that's kind of what they look like right there. And after quite a while, the volume goes down, and you can see here it is boiling. You don't really want it to boil, but if it gets boiling too much, take it off the stove for a little while, and keep stirring. You don't ever want it to just sit there and boil like crazy. And work off to the side. It's dangerous, so be really, really careful. And in the end, what you're going to have is all this kind of sandy little pieces of rocks that will not dissolve. And so then I take it off the burner, and I wait for about 20 minutes till it cools. And here I took an old screen and put it in the top of a jar. And then basically you're pouring the pot there, the resin that's in there, you're straining out all the big rocks and things like that. So I pour as much as I can in there without it falling all out. All this stuff looks so dark now, but you'll be real surprised. Later on, it won't really be that dark at all. It'll look like a real nice honey color. You wouldn't think. And one of the worst parts about this is it seems like it's only really, really best to use after at least a year. Good luck. I mean, I have used it right after I've made it, but the stuff that came out the best is stuff that I had left over for a year. And I've read that that's pretty common, is that it really takes a while. After everything gets real sticky, your hands, you can use paint thinner to clean off your hands, but I much prefer WD-40. It seems less caustic. And so lather it up, then wash it off with really warm water and soap. Here's a little amp I made. It's a Mojotone Vibro Champ. And see that piece of bamboo on the front there? For some reason, when you put it on the bamboo, it takes forever to dry. I mean, months sometimes. One of the big problems with this kind of varnish is sometimes it takes a long time to dry. Anyways, that's my little amp, and that's how I make my own pine varnish.